He is the sentinel of liberty, a man who literally personifies American ideals. So what could possibly make Steve Rogers turn his back on the Star-Spangled Banner? How about one of the greatest Captain America stories ever? Since late 1940, Steve Rogers has been fighting for cherished American values such as democracy and free speech, whether it be against the Nazis in the 1940s or communists in the 1950s. Yeah, I know, it turns out that wasn't Steve Rogers after all, but that was just a big retcon, so that Cap's new Marvel Age backstory fitted with his pre-Marvel continuity. Anyway, Cap's battles against communist Russians came at the wrong time for the character, as the post-war era found superhero comics falling out of fashion, and his only recently relaunched series was cancelled after just 3 commie-smashing issues. The good news for Steve Rogers was that the Marvel Age of Comics dawned the following decade. And in 1964, he found himself being given a new lease of life, both off and on the page. So Cap now found himself on the roster of Earth's mightiest heroes, where his tactical know-how, heightened physical prowess and inspirational presence would come in great use against supervillains, evil aliens, maniacal robots and various other uncanny threats. The days of battling political extremism were in the past. Or were they? The United States of America had gone through some changes of its own in those decades, changes that resulted in a groundswell of disillusionment in those in power. The threat of fascism was quickly buried in the battlefields of Europe, but the shadow of the red menace of communism, a mindset every bit as threatening to the US government as any army, had caused political witch hunts into the 1950s that many saw as themselves being contrary to American values. The early 70s had seen the Watergate scandal break, an event that would lead to the resignation of President Nixon in August 1974. Plus, of course, this was against the backdrop of the Vietnam War, a long, brutal, bloody war that the USA had become embroiled in the late 50s that just dragged on and on until the Paris Peace Accords of 1973 effectively ended US participation. It was the end of an unpopular war that claimed the lives of over 1 million people and sparked a strong anti-war movement. Among those who objected to the war was writer Steve Englehart. He was someone who had actually served in the military but been given an honourable discharge on the grounds of being a conscientious objector. 2 years later, he found himself in the bullpen. 1971 to 72 proved to be a busy time for Steve. He got his first work for Marvel, and then some. After a couple of single-issue stories for Monsters on the Prowl and some lovey-dovey titles, he landed regular writing jobs on Amazing Adventures, where the Beast got his own solo stories, and The Defenders. Just 1 month after launching the Non-Teams series, he also took over Captain America. Later on in 72, he would add The Avengers and the short-lived Doc Savage to his workload. Where Cap was concerned, it was an interesting time. After years of being written by Stan Lee and then a short stint from Gary Friedrich, the book was actually being eyed up for cancellation. Steve himself believes that one of the problems was that during a period of national self-doubt and in the face of a lively anti-war movement, a guy draped in old glory was a little bit out of kilter with the people. Writers and editors alike didn't know what to do with the character. Englehart couldn't ignore this backdrop and so asked himself a simple question: who is Captain America? The answer produced a truly great storyline. Steve had taken over the title with issue 153. Since then, Cap had squared off against the likes of the Viper and Dr. Faustus, the second of whom had revealed that he had been keeping Peggy Carter, heartbroken since the apparent death of Cap, as a guest. The Viper returned with the Serpent Squad in tow for a failed stab at revenge, before Cap and the Falcon took on the Yellow Claw. Aside from the villains, there has been something else going on in the background. In issue 165, Peggy tells Steve that she has heard adverts on the radio claiming that he was nothing more than a vigilante, serving his own form of arbitrary justice. In the following issue, he sees a newspaper ad making the same claim. An ad, bear in mind, not an article. And that pretty much brings us up to date with issue 169. The only other thing you need to know before we start is that the artist is Sal Buscema. But you know what? I probably didn't have to tell you that, because this story features all of his stylistic traits at their most extreme. Now, sit back, buckle up, and prepare to witness the end of a legend. So here we go. And, well, we knew he was quitting, but when a legend dies? Say it ain't so. Actually, we don't even see Cap initially in this issue. Instead, we get a nice introduction with the Falcon. And in fact, it's a good introduction to the Falcon for anyone who is not so familiar with the character. It tells us that he is the partner to Captain America. Although he is often frustrated and feels that he's living in Cap's shadow. And that's very true. Often leading up to this point in the character's history, the Falcon did feel frustrated. That he was kind of living in the shadow of Captain America. That he wasn't worthy of being his partner. We're told he has a special companionship with a hunting hawk called Redwing. A loving companionship with a girl named Layla. That he lives in Harlem. And that tonight there'll be an attempt on his life. And indeed, a mysterious car tries to run him down and succeeds to a degree. The 5 men that are riding in the car get out to finish the job. But the Falcon isn't so easy to finish off. These men work for Morgan, a Harlem crime boss who did want the Falcon to work for him and didn't take the Falcon's rejection of that offer well. He fights well, but despite his best efforts, he seems incapable of actually putting any of these people down. Is that harsh of me? After all, there are 5 of them and just 1 of him. Although it does highlight a point that he himself goes on to make. A few issues ago, Steve Rogers was stitched up by his landlord, as the man leased Steve's apartment to somebody else and sold all of his belongings. Since then, he has been staying with Sam Wilson, the Falcon. And now he emerges from Sam's apartment to see his colleague in the thick of it. A quick costume change sees Captain America arrive on the scene and instantly make a difference, as the Falcon finally downs 1 of his assailants and Cap downs another 3. Cap wants to pursue the gang after they flee the scene, but the Falcon says, "Don't worry about it, I know who they are, I know where to find them." What's really bugging the Falcon now is the way that those men ran off just because they had seen Captain America. Cap tries to reassure him that that's because at that point there were 2 of them. But Sam doesn't swallow any of that. He says they both know that those men were just scared of Cap's power, and that he, the Falcon, didn't scare them 1 bit. He says that if he's going to stay as Cap's partner, he has to be something more than just a costumed athlete. Maybe the Avengers could help. They can come up with something to give Sam that little bit extra. Cap suggests the obvious candidate, Tony Stark, but the Falcon says no. The guy he had in mind was the Black Panther. He is ruler of a country with incredible technology, plus the fact that the Black Panther is black would make him feel easier with the situation. Cap says that he will speak to the Panther and see what can be done. Then, after he leaves the Falcon, he sees something that is going to have an immeasurable impact on his life. He's heard about the adverts, he saw one in a newspaper, and now he sees one on the TV. It's his own image shown on a TV screen in a shop window that catches his attention. As he stops and watches the advert, he sees chapters of his life taken out of context, doubts cast over his motivations, the legitimacy of his actions, and over whose interests he actually serves. Does he serve America? The people's America? And we see that the advert is paid for by the Committee to Regain America's Principles. And a clear line is drawn here between this committee and the Real World House of Un-American Activities Committee, a body set up to root out disloyalty and communism within influential American society. A body that said that it was protecting American values, whilst its actions didn't always align with those same values. Cap is furious at what he's just seen, and although it causes him some concerns, he does reason that eventually, when people compare it against his actual record, they will realise it's nonsense. It's at that point he realises that members of the public have stopped to gawp at him, and as they do, another advert, one for washing powder, plays out on the TV behind him. It says, "Success, love. You know these depend on what others think of you. And our new improved Wash Day Miracle Delight promises cleaner, brighter." Now this is an interesting point, because despite Cap saying that his actions speak for themselves and the public know by his actions what kind of person he is, that's not strictly true. It's how his actions are perceived that will inform public opinion. And actually, there's a flip side here, because what about that committee, the Committee to Regain America's Principles? We know that they're engaged in some kind of smear campaign, but is that how the public perceive it? And if not, then that obviously is going to inform public opinion. And right now, public opinion is beginning to waver. He says he's never done anything illegal in his entire life, that he's always devoted himself to the bettering of life in America. But those bystanders seem less than convinced. The next morning, the streets of Harlem have an international visitor, as the private ship of the Black Panther touches down. He is there not just to meet the Falcon and his lady friend, but take them back to Wakanda to look for a solution to Sam Wilson's problem. Once the Falcon has left, Cap follows up a lead, because he has discovered that the TV spot was paid for by a particular ad agency, the same ad agency that also paid for the radio spots and that article in the newspaper. Forcing his way into the boss's office, the boss being Quentin Hardeman, he recognises the man behind the desk and says he was the announcer on that TV smear. Interestingly, Hardeman doesn't deny it was a smear. He merely says that he felt that the advert was appropriate. Hardeman explains that he set up the committee, and he set it up for loftier ends than just one man's reputation. He is not a fan of Captain America's. But if Cap agrees to take part in a charity boxing match, then perhaps he'll change his mind. Cap angrily says if that's all it takes to change his mind, then it's a deal, and he storms out of the office. That all seems a bit straightforward, doesn't it? Well, of course, there is more going on behind the scenes, because Hardeman is quickly on the phone, relaying a message that will put the next part of his plan into action. Because as Cap walks away from the agency, he hears a cry for help, and following it, discovers a robbery with the suspect still at the scene, but rapidly leaving. The suspect turns out to be the Tumbler, an old foe of Cap's from the days of Tales of Suspense. A nice little brawl ensues, with plenty of acrobatics and shield-slinging action. Expectedly, Cap gets the upper hand. However, when he thinks the Tumbler is unconscious, it turns out he is just playing possum, and he is happy to use Cap's shield to help him escape. Later that day, Steve's current girlfriend, Sharon Carter, tells him that Peggy has gone to apply to join S.H.I.E.L.D. She's doing this because she wants to end up fighting alongside Captain America, still thinking that they are dating and not knowing the truth about him and her younger sister. When he visits S.H.I.E.L.D. to ask them to politely turn down Peggy's application, he meets with a very frosty reception. This is mainly due to a falling out between Cap and Nick Fury a few issues back, along with the fact that we thought he'd actually killed Nick at one point. Steve Rogers does still have some admirers though, as he discovers the next day at an exhibition hall. It doesn't actually explain why he's there. I think this may be where the boxing match is going to take place, but we never get that far, because amongst the admirers and the public doubters, Quentin Hardeman is there. He's happy with how the campaign is proceeding. He mentions the fact that it's actually the Viper who started it all, and also he is accompanied by the civilian-clothed Tumbler. Cap recognises him straight away and tells him he's going to take him in for the robbery, but the Tumbler is in no mood to revisit Sing Sing, so makes a break for it. Another short skirmish ensues, one that ends with the Tumbler screaming in pain. But it is more than just pain, as the tumbler now lies dead. Dead, seemingly, by the hand of Captain America. And this whole scene is being watched. Watched from the eaves by the person that was actually responsible for the tumbler's death, and who now says that it's Captain America's turn to be demolished. Wow, there was a lot going on in that issue. How can they possibly follow it up? Well, one thing's for certain, looking at this cover, things aren't going to improve for our hero. We pick up where the last issue left off, and we see that the boys in blue have arrived at the scene because Captain America is now wanted for murder. As they tell Cap to get his hands up, we see his inner struggle, specifically created by writer Steve Englehart. Captain America represents the very best of his country. He must respect the law. But what if these officers are also part of the setup? And in that instant, a decision is made, followed by one of the officers making a very strange claim that Captain America is the strongest dude this side of the Thing. And the irony now is that by his own actions, the fugitive that is Captain America is confirming all of the lies that were spread by the committee. This isn't lost on him. He realises that if he doesn't stop the rumours and suspicions, there's no telling where this will all end. So he decides he does still have to do the right thing and hand himself in. Unfortunately, he's made that decision too late. Because that figure that was hiding in the shadows at the end of the previous issue now makes his public debut. His name is Moonstone, and after he takes Cap in, he's going to replace him as the hero of America. And then we get a big fight as the two rivals trade blows. Although clearly it seems that Moonstone has the upper hand, in terms of brawn, if nothing else. But there is more to Moonstone than just brawn. He can disappear and reappear at will. And he can fire lasers from his fingertips. And in doing so, he puts Cap down. But there needs to be more to this victory than just the physical aspect. So Quentin Hardeman, a man who Moonstone recognises as the boss, steps in and gives a speech. He talks about how a dangerous evil has been purged by time-honoured American competition. And he presents Moonstone to the crowd as the new defender of America's heritage. When Cap regains consciousness, he finds himself within a prison cell. And just to rub salt in the wounds, Quentin Hardeman and Moonstone are giving a press conference right outside the cell door. What they give the press is a very sanitised version of Moonstone's origin. Whilst they tell the press that he had been a humble janitor in a university, we see that he actually broke into a university, wherein he stole a moonstone that he thought would get a good price amongst European collectors. It was whilst the cops were trying to take him in for that theft that he discovered the incredible powers that the stone had bestowed upon him. And then, after getting himself a costume, he visited Quentin Hardeman and the Viper because he had heard that they were recruiting. He believed he could help them. Their plans to discredit Captain America were in their very earliest stages, but they could see that Moonstone would help them achieve that. Once the Viper had been captured by Captain America, those plans were put into motion. All the while, the press are lapping this up. Meanwhile, in Wakanda, whilst the Falcon and the Black Panther are poring over some plans, Sam Wilson's girlfriend, Layla, makes it clear that she is very bored. T'Challa recognises this and sends her on a trip to the capital of Nigeria, Lagos. Bully for her, you may think, but what's this got to do with anything? Well, it seems that Layla is incredibly unlucky, because whilst she's looking around a market, she's spotted by a former Harlem crime boss, Stoneface. She hasn't forgotten him, and he definitely hasn't forgotten her. And when he tries to abduct her, her Wakandan hosts leap to her defence, but are quickly cut down. And Layla is taken for a ride. Word of these murders is quickly picked up in Wakanda and relayed to the Black Panther. As he plans a rescue mission, he discovers that his words have been overheard by the Falcon, who of course is going to join him along with his brand new wings. And what a great image of the new and improved Falcon. And as for Cap, whilst sitting and lamenting his lot in the cell, one of the walls is blown inwards, and it seems that someone wants to help him bust loose. So that's got to be good news, hasn't it? Well, we'll see about that once we've had a look at this striking but slightly misleading cover to issue 171. That is a cover that can't be ignored. But like I said, it's not entirely accurate because the three characters never share the page within this issue. So Cap is going to be set free. Is he? No. Because he says that this isn't the right way. No matter how bleak things are looking, he has to put his trust in the process of American law. And if these guys aren't sure exactly how intent Cap is on not going with them, he soon makes it clear. The mistake that his would-be liberators make is turning on the guards that arrive to investigate the commotion. Cap knows that those men are just doing their duty, and he won't stand by and see them harmed. This has the added benefit of confirming in the minds of the guards that Cap is one of the good guys. As for his would-be rescuers, oh, look at that, the most Sal Buscema mouth ever. Is he even human? Anyway, as for his would-be rescuers, this breakout is also part of the grand plan. So they are going to liberate him whether he likes it or not. Despite gassing the guards and Cap, these guys show that they really are amateurs, as they didn't use a strong enough dose on Cap, and he comes to as they are talking through their plans. Uh-oh, I feel another Sal Buscema fight scene coming. And indeed that's what we get. Always action-packed and with his signature moves, such as people being launched upside down and backhanded punches. Only one of them remains conscious for questioning, but even he faints through sheer panic, leaving Captain America scant clues about who's behind all this. And now we don't see Cap until the last few pages of this issue, because we are back off to Nigeria. And it is there on the streets of Lagos that the Black Panther meets up with an agent of Wakanda. This man explains that it was Stoneface who is behind Layla's kidnap and the murder of her chaperones. And better than that, he can even tell them where Stoneface can be found. This is all that the Black Panther and Falcon needed to know as they launch an assault on the hideout. The Black Panther taking the more grounded route, and the Falcon using his wings for the very first time. Unfortunately, this shows, as his rather clumsy maiden flight ends in a very unfortunate crash landing. With the two heroes unconscious, one of Stoneface's henchmen asks if he should just finish them off where they lay. But Stoneface says, "No, not here." "Yeah, give them a chance to recover. It's only fair." When they do recover, they find themselves being held at the edge of a cliff. And Stoneface takes the very straightforward approach of throwing them off. Of course, he's failed to take into account the Falcon's new adaptations. And being launched off the side of a cliff gives him just what he needs to once more become airborne. This gives him the chance to do two things. Firstly, save the Black Panther from his destiny, before then wheeling around to reunite with his would-be killers. With the Black Panther's help, the rest of Stoneface's men, including Stoneface himself, are all dealt with. And Layla, for once, is impressed. So Layla has been rescued and the Falcon has been able to test out his new gift. Waving goodbye to the Black Panther, it is time for them to return to New York. Happy to be back in Harlem, Layla suggests they have a nice, cosy evening together. But the Falcon would much rather go and show Captain America his new wings. Oh, she's got the hump again. Sam Wilson arrives home to find not Captain America, but Iron Man waiting for him. He explains to the Falcon that the Avengers have decided to give him the opportunity to bring Cap in for this murder charge before they hunt him down. Sam clearly has more faith in his friend than they do. He says Cap is innocent, and if they just give him a few hours, he will find Cap and prove it. Actually, he doesn't even need hours, because his avian ally Red Wing finds Steve Rogers within minutes. And where is Cap? He is on Penn Street, a location mentioned by that last member of the gang before he passed out. He also mentioned the number 17, and here we are, number 1701 Penn Street, home of the Quentin Company. Quentin, yes, Quentin Hardman. It all adds up. When Sam arrives on the scene, he is quickly brought up to speed on what he's missed whilst he's been away, and then they are joined by Moonstone, who announces that he has recorded their conversation and he is going to use that to show that the Falcon is just as much a villain as his friend Captain America. And then he really runs off at the mouth. After announcing that he is Captain America's replacement, he admits that he was the one who killed the Tumbler. He says that he and Hardman are in it for power and money, and the sheer enjoyment of seeing Cap destroyed. The Falcon says he is proud to be Captain America's partner, but pride comes before a fall, and the same lasers that took out Steve Rogers now take down his friend. Distracted by his colleague's plight, Cap leaves himself open to an attack from Moonstone, as he uses, it looks kind of like an electrical attack, but I'm guessing it's just another manifestation of those lasers of his. Regardless, both heroes are now unconscious, and Moonstone announces his ultimate victory. And it ends telling us that next issue features a turnabout. Well, let's hope so. Cap could certainly do with one. Actually, the beginning of the next issue is rather interesting, because it reminds me of those old serials like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, where the beginning of each episode repeated the end of the previous episode, but showed you something extra that you didn't see before. Well, this doesn't cheat like they used to. Instead, it moves on from that closing/opening line to show us that Moonstone is going to kill both of the heroes. But, of course, he is stopped. Stopped by the boss himself, Quentin Hardman. He doesn't want our two heroes to become martyrs, so instead he suggests that Moonstone take the two unconscious forms to Central Park. There he leaves them in the care of the group that busted Cap out in the previous issue, whilst he goes off and makes phone calls to the press about the fact that he has captured these two criminals. But this bunch of jokers haven't learnt from the last issue, as once again Cap comes around without them noticing and subjects them all to a Sal Buscema-style beating. But what's this? Maybe they will have the chance to off Cap after all. You hadn't forgotten about the Falcon, had you? Even Red Wing gets in on the humiliation of these clowns. Moonstone is now on his way back to Central Park, happy that the press are on their way. But that happiness is soon turned upside down, as is Moonstone, by the departing heroes. He lets them go because he doesn't want to face the two of them in full view of the public. Then a furious Moonstone, remembering that the press are on their way, says that the only way he can save face is by pretending that he was jumped by the heroes, and he asks one of the men to smash him on the back of the head. So what now? Steve Rogers needs something to help him get the drop on his adversaries. And it comes with something of a leap of logic, as he says he remembers Moonstone making references to country music and mentioning that museum Moonrock. So he concludes, which town known for country music also has a museum with a genuine Moonrock? Of course, it has to be Nashville, if you say so. And so, cashless, on the run from the law, our two heroes hitchhike down to Tennessee. arriving in Nashville, our two heroes are unaware that walking the very same street as them, in fact just half a block ahead of them, is a mutant. Because Banshee is in town. And here we learn two things. Firstly, that he is a fan of country music. And secondly, that superheroes always keep their costumes on when they're wearing raincoats. And now it's Banshee's turn to make an unlikely leap of logic. Because he recognised Steve Rogers' costume, he's kept up with the news so he knows that Captain America is a criminal, and he reasons that Cap is there to track him down for his gang. And he shouts, "You'll never take the Banshee alive!" Slightly paranoid. He may know our heroes, but they have never seen him before. And despite quickly getting ready for action, they are unprepared for his ultrasonic attack. A distracting shield toss from Cap allows him to get close enough to plant a firm blow on the Irishman's jaw, robbing him of his weapon. Instead, Banshee tries to escape. We see that the Falcon has found a really awful way of taking flight. However, it works, and he is able to put a temporary pause to the fight. The Falcon has already used his wings quite a few times since getting them, and it's clear that this addition to his costume, to his character, really has brought something new to the title. Even purely from an artistic point of view, now we aren't just watching two guys slugging it out with their enemies. Cap can launch his shield, and the Falcon can soar skyward. Speaking of enemies, Banshee has now recovered enough so that he can once more use his abilities. This time he doesn't direct his scream at the heroes, but instead at the building behind them. Once that rubble has slowed them down, he then fully unleashes on the duo. Despite his best efforts, the Falcon quickly succumbs, but Cap struggles on, even reaching Banshee himself. But still, ultimately, the audio assault is too much, and he too loses consciousness. That is when some new players enter the fray, because Banshee is suddenly shocked by a laser landing at his feet. But actually, it isn't a laser at all, it's an optic blast. The X-Men, or what's left of them, are here. Cyclops says that they've come a long way to find Banshee, something that the Irishman doesn't appreciate. He then hits Cyclops with a sonic attack, enough to daze the young X-Man, so Banshee can leave the scene. Cap and Falk recover, and then find themselves being lifted up into the air, lifted out of the city and into open country, where they discover that their seeming flight is down to Marvel Girl. She and Professor X are there, and they have something very important to tell Captain America. Professor X explains that the Banshee attacked Captain America and his companion because open season has been declared on mutants, and he thought that that was why they were after him. That same group are the ones who have framed Cap. Basically, the same group that are hunting Cap are hunting the X-Men. In all honesty, they'll do very well to track them down. At this point in time, the X-Men didn't even have their own comic.
Well, that's not strictly speaking true. The X-Men comic was still on newsstands, but faced with dwindling sales, issue 66, released as the 70s dawned, contained the last original work. And the title became a reprint series for about a year and a half after this appearance. During those 5 years, if you wanted new adventures featuring our favourite mutants, you had to keep your eyes peeled for their occasional guest appearances in other characters' books. Wouldn't that be an interesting period to look at?
So who is it that's hunting these heroes? Well, from the cover of the next issue and the beginning of the story, it appears to be S.H.I.E.L.D. Although you know as well as I do that appearances can be deceptive. Whilst our heroes face off against Nick Fury and his men, and those self-same men are deciding whether or not they should tell their leader that he's talking into a car headlamp rather than a megaphone, Fury says it's all over. There's no way that they're leaving without Captain America. But he also says that they didn't come here for them. I don't get it. If they're not there for Cap, why are they there?
Captain America is quickly pledged the support of his partner, the Falcon, and the X-Men. And with that, he decides to resist arrest. You want action? You've got it. Whether it be Cap's shield and Cyclops' optic beams, or Marvel Girl using her telekinetic powers to give Falcon liftoff, and then the Falcon happily bringing himself back earthward, our heroes work together to effect their escape. Part of which is down to Cyclops setting light to the underbrush with his optic beams. Shall I point it out, or shall you? His optic beams aren't supposed to be hot, are they? But this does happen from time to time. Cyclops' optic beams are supposed to be concussion beams, a beam of pure force. But every now and again, when it suits the writer, they do make them able to generate heat. I guess this is one of those occasions. Escaping the scene and S.H.I.E.L.D., our heroes hunker down in an old, deserted mine tunnel. A detail I was convinced would be relevant, but it isn't. It just turns out it's a good place to hide. Whilst there, Professor X catches all of us up on the X-Men's adventures since their title resorted to reprints. We see they had a run-in with Magneto, which saw the Avengers come to their aid, but we also see that some of their number have been missing. The Angel, the Beast, Lorna Dane, Havoc, and Iceman. All of them seem to have vanished. The Professor concludes that a silent, subtle, and sinister war has been declared against mutants. It was his search for allies that sent them on the path to Banshee. Throughout this time, they have picked up clues as to the identity of who is behind this, and they have discovered that the enemy is called the Secret Empire. They seek to dominate without people being aware of it. They use advertising or propaganda. One of their number that is behind this is Quentin Hardeman, a name that Cap knows only too well. And so a formal alliance between the heroes is formed. The Professor also tells Cap about a woman called Linda Donaldson, who is pretending to be a girlfriend to the Beast. However, she helped to capture him and deliver him to the Secret Empire. She now, though, is going to form the basis of their plan for overcoming the Secret Empire. We see her in contact with her paymasters, explaining that so far she has been unable to steal the electron gyro that they so desperately want. This is clearly an issue for them. They need that gyro, and she needs to work out how to get her hands on it. Then, as she leaves her car, something unexpected happens. She is pounced on by Cyclops, who, it seems, is going to abduct her. But she's in luck, because two seemingly normal guys are going to come to her aid. Cyclops and her two saviours have an entirely convincing but completely fake fight. And as Cyclops runs off, it seems their plan has worked. Linda is convinced that they have genuinely saved her from the X-Man. They introduce themselves as Willie Samuels and Roger Stevens. I assume her real name is Donald Linderson. It's better than that, because these two passers-by also seem to hate mutants just as much as she and the Secret Empire. Maybe she could find a use for two such men. Later that night, our two passers-by receive a visitor to their fake apartment. It seems the Secret Empire has found them. This representative of the Empire offers them $10,000 to steal the electro gyro. Succeed and they will be rewarded even beyond that. Of course, our heroes accept, and the Secret Empire have taken the bait. Midnight, and the duo are at the Brand Corporation, home of the electro gyro. They are in costume for a reason that Cap doesn't entirely explain yet. Both hate the fact that they are stealing, even if it is for a greater good. Nonetheless, infiltrating the installation, they locate the gyro, and although they don't evade the guards, they do manage to deal with them in a non-lethal manner. Leaping through a window, it's the Falcon's wings that once more save the day. Within the corporation, the duo's actions confirm to some people that they are the villains the press claim them to be. However, now we see why they were in costume. Because Captain America left a note behind, explaining that he wasn't stealing the gyro, he just needed it for a very important reason, and it will be returned. The installation boss believes him and believes in him. He'll hear no more about it from the guards. The representative from the Secret Empire is overjoyed with our hero's results. With the coveted electro gyro in hand, he takes them via a Secret Empire spaceship to their hidden base. How is this hidden base uncovered? Quite brilliantly, as it turns out, as the lever to the entrance is disguised as a cactus. Fantastic. So far, our hero's plans are working. Steve and Sam have gained access to the Secret Empire's hidden HQ, the X-Men have followed them, and we have had another very full issue. Let us join them in the bowels of the Secret Empire's HQ in issue 174. Accompanied by number 13, Steve and Sam have got themselves a ticket not just into the heart of the Secret Empire's operation, but to a meeting with the head of the Secret Empire himself, number 1. He explains why the electron gyro was so important. It was the final component that they needed for their conquest of America. And now nothing will keep them from their goal. He explains that with the nation reeling from the loss of faith in Captain America, and even the Watergate scandal, the Committee to Regain America's Principles has been swamped with support. The public are grateful for the work that arm of the Secret Empire has been carrying out. Grateful too towards the pseudo-hero Moonstone, a man who will have an important role to play once the Secret Empire finally strikes. And now the Secret Empire's 2 newest recruits are taken to a room that will serve as their dormitory. The door to the room is locked behind them, which is a little bit concerning. But Sam says it's more than that. He has a strange feeling, and he orders Cap to change into his costume without delay. And when he gets his super strong partner to tear off a panel in the room, the pair are able to break free. And not a moment too soon, as dozens of fatal laser beams crisscross the room. Had they still been in there, they would be dead. But why? Had the Secret Empire been tipped off as to their true identities? Yes, they had. By none other than the boss of that brand corporation factory, a man who is also a part of the Secret Empire. But if he was in charge of that installation, why didn't he just take the electron gyro? We then learn that preemptive behaviour from Sam Wilson wasn't just down to some crazy hunch, it was down to Professor X, who had psychically warned Sam of the danger, having recognised the installation boss. I think we need a bit more action, don't we? So how do you fancy a massive robot? This results in a dynamic, feather-flying, shield-slinging fight, after which all of our heroes finally reunite. Professor X explains that he was able to warn Sam because he believes that Sam has a paranormal mind, something evidenced by his uncanny relationship with Redwing. He also reveals that he has located the missing mutants and they are there in the Secret Empire's base. Whilst all this is going on, Moonstone is appearing on a David Letterman style show where he is charming not only the host and co-guest, but also the wider public. And as Quentin Hardman looks on, he revels in the fact that he appears to have succeeded in doing exactly what the Secret Empire wanted him to achieve, getting the public to trust Moonstone. And what of the missing mutants? Like I said, they have been found. Oh boy. All of the missing X-Men, plus some of their enemies, including a few Z-listers such as Mesmero and Mastermind, are hooked up to a giant wheel that is part of some larger, mysterious machine. Apparently, it is draining them of their brainwaves, and Cyclops and Captain America quickly set about destroying it and freeing their colleagues. Do you remember a few issues ago when someone referred to Cap as the strongest guy this side of the Thing? That may have seemed odd, but at this point it was entirely true, because roughly a year before this, Cap was given legitimate super strength powers. Steve Englehart wasn't really a fan of the idea, and shortly after it happened, he didn't mention it much, and eventually it was just forgotten about. And that's fair enough, because Cap doesn't need super strength powers. He's not that kind of a hero. And even here, when he's destroying the machine, he doesn't use his bare, super strong hands. He uses his shield. Before the newly discovered mutants can recover, the Secret Empire turn up. This gives us another spectacular battle, wherein everybody, Cap, the Falcon, Cyclops and Marvel Girl, all get in on the action. And they are making a mockery of their enemy's forces, until, that is, number one calls for the Atomic Annihilator. That can't be good. Number 68, the man who had discovered our heroes' escape from their locked room, arrives with the Annihilator and without hesitation unleashes it on the heroes. Number one announces with glee that nobody can survive the Atomic Annihilator. And with those heroes finally defeated, America will soon follow. I can't believe it. All our favourite heroes dead. Yeah, I know they're not. I'm just playing along. But how could they possibly have survived the Atomic Annihilator? We find out in the penultimate chapter of our tale. It certainly doesn't look good to begin with. However, it seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. had a man on the inside. A man and a woman, in fact. Because number 68 is no longer the original number 68. Instead, he is longtime S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Gabe Jones. And he is accompanied by S.H.I.E.L.D.'s latest recruit, Peggy Carter. Because it turns out that S.H.I.E.L.D. have had a file on the Secret Empire for a long time. So that's why S.H.I.E.L.D. were in town. We then get a history lesson from Gabe explaining how he managed to infiltrate the organisation before seeing that the mutants have been recaptured and are now being put to use. Because their mutant brainwaves are going to power the Secret Empire's flying saucer. Seriously. A flying saucer that will be steered by the electron gyro. I swear I'm not making this up. And that flying saucer is going to help the Secret Empire to conquer America. That's a bit of a downgrade from the usual, isn't it? The rest of the Secret Empire's plans are coming along nicely too, in Washington DC, where a very self-satisfied Quentin Hardiman says that Moonstone's position as public hero number one is secure, thanks to his manipulation of the truth and Captain America's failed defence of his name. Moonstone quotes Hardiman, saying, "Lies are neat, truth is messy." And then we have another reference to Watergate, saying that the truth getting out about that scandal is just the exception, before the Secret Empire's flying saucer lands on the White House lawn. Now, if you're thinking that a flying saucer landing on the White House lawn is a bit over the top, well, you're right, it is. But apparently that was the Secret Empire's intention. It had a lot more impact, and the fear of UFOs runs deep in mankind, apparently. But also, from the writer's point of view, it represents a very obvious fear. The fear of invasion, of attack, of some kind of threat that is external, the most external of all, from another planet. Whereas in reality, the real threat throughout this story is a lot more domestic. The press are there, the army are there, all unwittingly playing their part. And then a screen emerges from the UFO, displaying the image of number one, who demands the immediate and unconditional surrender of America. Of course, the army rejects this offer, but they find that their artillery has no effect against the flying saucer's force field. A force field again generated by the brainwaves of mutants. Of course, there are concerns about the president, but we are told that the White House says that he is at his retreat, but he is supposed to be flying in. Number one rants on. Your leader is far away. Your so-called superheroes are in New York. No one is here to protect you. Well, there is someone. No, not Captain America. Instead, his replacement flies in, and after issuing a challenge to number one, is met by number two, who has a very different look to the rest of the Secret Empire. The two fight as the cameras of the world look on. But this time, it's Moonstone who is defeated. and he is taken inside the flying saucer by number 2, a man who, of course, is actually Moonstone's ally. After a convincingly long pause, Moonstone re-emerges. He tells the waiting press that he has felt the power of the secret empire, seen the weaponry that they possess, and heard number 1's shockingly perfect plan for their subjugation. The people of America have already been defeated. Behind him, number 1 himself appears, explaining that at that exact moment, his agents, the sanitation squad, those jokers, they're the ones who tried to spring Cap earlier on. Anyway, they are planting atomic explosives in public places all across America. The nation has 30 minutes to surrender before he orders the destruction of every major city. So the ultimate play for power is made. Will the United States surrender? Wait a minute, aren't we forgetting someone? Indeed we are, because the flying saucer is carrying more passengers than they realise, and the time is now ripe for those passengers to make their presence known. And how? I don't know why he's accusing them of treachery. He knows they're not on his side. We can't even make out what happens to those 2 secret Empire operatives, but whatever it was effective. Now Falcon and the 2 X-Men set about clearing out the rat's nest. Cap is heading in the other direction, and Falcon says, "Where are you going, Cap?" To which he replies simply, "Outside." First on Cap's hit list, literally, is number 1 himself. That was no challenge though. So what about Moonstone? We've been here before and it didn't end well for Cap. Moonstone says that Cap is there to join his secret Empire friends, and that was a bad move, because Cap says, "Mister, that's the last lie you're ever going to tell about me." And he hammers that point home. We get a decent fight scene here. The odd thing though is that these panels are really big. Just 5 panels over 2 pages. Surely they don't need filler in a story like this. We are asked what makes a fighter. Muscles, of course, extraordinary powers, and Moonstone has these. But Captain America has spirit. He has a fighting heart and fierce pride, and a cold determination that now, before the eyes of the television-watching nation, he will vindicate all that he is. And that is what makes a fighter. I think we can assume that Moonstone is finished. Indeed, he and the fight is over. And Quentin Hardeman tries to make the best of the situation. He thanks Captain America, says that his committee had been duped by Moonstone. But that just encourages Moonstone to spill the beans. All of the beans. He says that Quentin and his committee were never anything but a front for the secret empire. That it was his idea to ruin Cap, and he convinced Moonstone and the Empire to follow that plan. And every person in America sitting in front of a TV screen hears this confession, including the man who began it all, the Viper. In the meantime, S.H.I.E.L.D. have dealt with those atomic bombs hidden around America, and now we are told that thanks to the broadcast, every member of the secret empire will soon join the Viper inside a prison cell. And America's faith in their hero, the man who wears the colours of their flag, is restored. It says you couldn't ask for a neater wrap-up. And that's very true, although it is a bit too quick, a bit too neat. Number 1. Cap spots him making a break for it, but he isn't running away from the scene. Instead, he is running into the White House. And it is on this, the very last page of the Secret Empire saga, that number 1's identity is finally revealed. Because Cap easily catches him up and tears off the cowl, but he can't believe what he sees beneath. He stammers, "But you're..." And number 1 says, "Exactly. But high political office didn't satisfy me. My power was still too constrained by legalities. I gambled on a coup to gain the power I craved, and it appears that my gamble has finally failed." And with that, number 1 takes his own life. So number 1, the head of the secret empire, was actually the President of the United States of America. It doesn't explicitly say it here, but the inference is very clear. And not only that, but it wasn't supposed to be just a general, a vague President of the United States of America. It was originally Steve Englehart's intention to name him as Richard Nixon. He decided against that because he figured that Marvel wouldn't allow it, although he does say in hindsight, Marvel was such a great place for free-thinking creative types that they probably would have allowed him to say it, but he chose not to. Of course, President Nixon didn't kill himself in office. In fact, he resigned just a few months after this issue came out. So, is this whole thing an analogy for Watergate? Pretty much, yeah. There is that theme of the person in charge, the evil mastermind, being the president and wanting to cling on to power even if he had to circumvent the law to do so. Plus, there's one other thing. Number one's right-hand man, the guy who was pulling the public relations strings, was Quentin Hardeman. And who performed a similar role for Richard Nixon? A man named Bob Haldeman. Disappointingly, he didn't wear glasses. Now that would have been the cherry on the cake. So how has all of this affected Captain America? Well, he took a lot of things on trust. He trusted the country of his birth. He trusted its basic framework, its stated goals, its long-term virtue. But now he has seen his trust mocked, and it has crushed him. So what next for the Sentinel of Liberty? Well, there's only one way to find out. But don't get your hopes up. Again with the talk of death. But this isn't Steve Rogers we're talking about here. It is specifically the death of Captain America. And under dark, stormy skies, Cap himself makes a great point. So many have tried to kill Captain America, but only he can actually do it. But can he do it? We then get a recap of his origin, seeing Steve Rogers as a young, extremely keen, eager, but ultimately not fit enough to be accepted. But then he finds there is a way that he can help, that he can contribute, when he is asked, would he volunteer for an experiment? To which he eagerly says, yes, yes, yes. Okay, son, we want to know if a man can survive eating nothing but his own excrement. Probably should have asked a few questions before agreeing so eagerly. But we all know that wasn't the experiment. Instead, the experiment resulted in the birth of an icon. In light of what he has learnt about the president, can that icon continue? Should he continue? Or should he quit? He is mulling this over in Avengers Mansion when one of his longtime colleagues makes an appearance. Thor tries to sell the heroic life to Captain America. He talks of all the glories that he himself has had, and also the glories that he has shared side by side with Captain America. He says that is when a man is fully alive and when true nobility will out. But Cap says that he now can't see as much nobility as he once did. He says that down here on Earth, things just aren't that simple. After all, he didn't feel particularly noble when he stole the electron gyro. He did it because he had to save his name. But now he's not sure if he is worthy of having that name. He says he's learned a lot since the days that he revelled in his enemies' deaths. Otherwise known as the Golden Age. Didn't every hero revel in their enemies' deaths back then? And now Iron Man turns up, with his nose. Oh my God, that nose. He explains to Cap that very few people in this world are lucky enough to have the advantages that those two have, and that obligates them to use those advantages. He says, what would have happened if the two of them hadn't been around to rescue the Wasp, or if Cap had been absent from the Second World War, unable to assist the Allies? Plus, there's all the money that he's raised for charity. But this argument doesn't work. Cap says Iron Man is right. His entire career he's done almost nothing except try to help his fellow man. And what happens? So many of them were quick to turn against him when they heard the lies of Quentin Hardeman. Sure, people have appreciated his help over the years, but now people have started to take it for granted. It seems it's just lost its meaning. Now the Falcon bursts in, and he's not happy that he's heard his partner is considering quitting. He asks his partner what's going on. Cap says that the Falcon saw most of it, but not all of it. There was one part in the White House that he's not allowed to even tell anyone about. And the Falcon says, yeah, the authorities put a lid on it too. So that avoids the death of the president being a massive story on Earth 616. He then reminds Cap what he has done for him personally, how he changed his life and has helped him to achieve his potential. We then get a recap of some of their adventures against some of Cap's old foes, including Stoneface, and the Falcon says that they achieved what they've achieved because of Cap's leadership. That's what he is. He is a leader. But is he a leader? The lies spread about him weren't true, but there are other people who are supposed to be examples of what is right, who aren't so innocent. How can people trust heroes anymore? Maybe that hero worship does as much harm as good. But the Falcon makes a great point. Yes, there are good heroes and bad heroes, but if the good ones drop out, then what good will that do anyone? People will always want good heroes. Steve should give them Captain America. Peggy chips in by saying that he is more than an example, he is a symbol of the country that's given everything it has to light the torch of liberty throughout the world. But he says that America isn't the single entity that she's talking about. It has changed since he took his name. Initially it was simple. All of America was united against a common foe. But now a variety of Americans stand for a variety of ideals. Can he possibly represent them all? Having said their piece, Iron Man, the Falcon and Peggy leave Steve alone. But he still has one or two visitors left. The Vision speaks only briefly, but asks a very personal question. Can Captain America turn away from a life of adventure? He doesn't wait for an answer. Instead, Cap gets his very last visitor, Sharon Carter. She doesn't try to talk him round. All she says is that whatever he decides, she will support him. She says it's the man under the mask that she fell in love with. And that isn't going to change. Finally, Captain America has the solitude he needs to think. He thinks how he was desperate to hear something new from all of those visitors, a new viewpoint. But he didn't. They were all right in their own ways, but none of it matters because they all missed the point. The government created him in 1941, and since then he has always done his best for the country. But now he has discovered that the government was serving itself. Look at those heavy eyes. What weight is he carrying? He's carrying the weight of the knowledge that everything he has fought for was a sham. And because of that, Steve Rogers quits. And there you have it. That final soul-searching issue has shown us how Steve Rogers reached his historic decision. Steve Englehart's tale, reflecting how the American public's confidence in their government was eroded as the 20th century progressed, has come to an end. The Secret Empire saga may have drawn to a close, but Steve Rogers' personal odyssey was only just beginning.